What is the most common government form that you need to sign and date?
There's the SF 1449 form, there's the SF 1442 form, and there's also the SF 18 form. These forms are very, very similar, but depending on what type of industry and type of contracts you're in and you're going after, you will encounter one form or the other quite a bit. Here's the difference between them. So the SF 1449 form is going to be largely for service contracts, also contracts requiring a more formal RFP, request for proposal. The SF 1442 is going to be for construction contracts, and it's going to look very similar to the 1449. And the SF 18 form, standard form 18, is going to be more for a request for quotes. You may be putting your price directly on the form potentially as well. But all three of these versions, as I said, they're going to look very similar to each other. And you need to print, date, and sign. And you also typically would add your company address and cage code in one of the boxes on the forms as well. So familiarize yourself with what these look like, because as you're going through solicitations on sam.gov, odds are you're going to be see one or several of these fairly common, like I said, again, based off of, the industries and the type of contracts you're going after.
When the contracting officer makes changes to the solicitation, how can you acknowledge that you have adjusted your price or your proposal accordingly?
Okay, so this next form is called the SF30 form, Standard Form 30. And this is a way to formally acknowledge a change, or in government contracting, federal government contracting, to formally acknowledge an amendment. So anytime there is a change or new information even added, right? This can be changes to the statement of work. This can be Q&As being posted. This can be updated site visit information. There can be a lot of changes that happen during the solicitation stage, solicitation cycle, whether it's over a period of a couple of weeks or maybe even a couple months. Unlikely to be as short as a couple of days, but it happens sometimes as well. So between a couple of weeks and a couple of months, there's changes. And then you're writing your proposal, you're attending site visits, maybe contracting is even receiving new information themselves. And this is cause for change. Or maybe even some company or a company, right? Maybe this is you guys, is asking for an extension. So change in due date. These are all changes, and they're not contract mods because the contract hasn't been awarded yet. Nothing is in place being performed on. So this is actually more of a solicitation mod, if you will. It's called an amendment. So you will see a SF30 form, and on that form, it will tell you, there'll be a little box, so you want to look for it, whether you have to fill out and return the SF30 to contracting or not. Is the contractor required to sign and return or not in order to formally acknowledge? So you want to make sure that if you do have this form, if contracting does include it as one of your downloads, that you read and you look for that, because that means potentially the amendment, or if there could be several amendments, there could be several of these forms needed. It happens all the time. It's fairly common if there's several changes that happen over a period of time. So when you're submitting your proposal, you want to make sure, if required, you're including that SF30 form that's signed and acknowledged if it needs to be formally acknowledged.
If the government needs to see references from past projects, is there a special form for this?
There is a past performance questionnaire form for this. It's called a PPQ. And the way a PPQ works is you don't fill it out on behalf of your company, right? Or say you're working with a teaming partner as well and using their past performance. It has to be filled out by the previous client, whoever the work was previously performed by. Now, one thing you can do to make this a little bit easier is pre-fill some of your company information. But as you will always see in a PPQ, there's going to be specific questions regarding you or your teaming partner's performance on that previous contract, right? Specific questions about how the work was performed. Was it on time? Was it, under budget, on budget? Were there any issues? And they're going to want honest answers to that. Or how would you rate them in these different ways? Were they satisfactory? Were they exceptional? Somewhere in between, right? So the previous client has to answer those questions. So when you have a PPQ, contracting again will have to provide this to you, and you pre-fill some of the easy company info, and then you give it to the client. The client fills out the rest. From there, the client has to send that PPQ from their email to the contracting officer. And this is where a lot of proposals can kind of fall apart and awards not be made to certain companies because the client will drop the ball. So it's very, very, very important if you are allowing PPQs to be part of your bid no bid process, meaning you're going to still go after opportunities that require a PPQ. That means you do have clients, and you do have clients that are responsive enough to properly fill out the PPQ, and then they send it to contracting before the proposal due date. And that's also really, really important. Contracting will, confirm if they've received it, but when it comes time and they didn't receive it or they didn't receive it in time, it's going to be evaluated as if they did not receive the PPQ, which for a proposal that's requiring that will probably remove you from an actual evaluation consideration. You're probably just not going to shake up with the other companies. You're not going to be able to skate by without it, more than likely if they're requiring it. So PPQ is the formal process to go about it, but you only have to go that process if they're asking for one. Not every solicitation is requiring a PPQ. Some instances, you're just writing past performance yourself as the prime, your company, in your proposal in the past performance section, or in other instances, past performance or references aren't even asked for. So every bid is different. Every solicitation has different requirements.
Do you make up your own pricing table, or is there somewhere specific you're supposed to bring out your pricing?
So yes, there is somewhere specific you're supposed to put this if they're giving it to you, which more often than not they are. So you should have a pricing CLIN schedule. So CLIN, contract line item number, pricing CLIN. And it could look something like 0001, 10001, 20001 to represent base and option periods, for example. There's other nuanced ways that they can do it as well, like 0001A, 0001AB. Like it depends. Sometimes you could have 20 pages of pricing CLINs. Other times it's just one or a couple pages, and that's typically what we would see. So you would want to fill out your pricing there, and you want your pricing to match whatever the pricing CLIN is asking for. So if they're just having you do like one job for the whole year, that'll just be like your unit maybe per month. And then the aggregate, which is how much is it for 12 months, for 1 year, right? Other instances, it will be for specific tasks, or like in staffing, specific people, or if it's a project-based job, specific milestones of the project. Then when it comes to bill and invoice, it's going to be those CLIN, okay, think of those as buckets of money, those CLIN line item numbers, that's going to actually attach to your invoice. That way, contracting and you both know where the money is coming from. There's not just one big old pot of money and when it runs out, it runs out. It's more detailed than that on the back end with contracting as well. So it starts with understanding your pricing or your pricing breakdowns to match what's being asked for in these pricing CLINs. Now, sometimes those CLINs will live inside of a solicitation doc, and they'll come right after that SF-1449 or that SF-1442 form that we just talked about. Sometimes you'll see it like that. Other times, it's actually a separate Excel sheet. It could just be an Excel sheet that the guy or gal in contracting, they just made it up, right? Or they're copying and pasting from a previous solicitation, and then they're putting it in your bid packet. So these are the common variations you can expect to see. Or other instances, you will receive nothing. And then that kind of gets to the first part of this question, which is, what if you don't, do you make up your own pricing CLIN table? So you can also make up your own pricing CLIN table if they don't give you one. And if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that you make up pricing CLINs, because even for your own sake, you want to be specific with what you're pricing. You want to be specific with what you're going to be able to bill out against an invoice on when it comes down to if you actually are awarded. Now, again, if it's just one price, it's just one price. We don't have to be complicated about it. But this is really kind of like the boundaries and the up and down, left and right of what you could potentially see when it comes to this. Now, guys, we're one of the fastest growing federal contracting channels, but the GovKidMethod has been around since 2019, okay? And we made it through COVID, and here we are in this video in 2026. If you are subscribed and you are following the steps, I want to know this. Comment the word method down below. If you are part of our community, if you are a subscriber, or if you subscribe from this video, maybe you're not part of the method, just comment the word new down below. That way we know that you just subscribed from this video. We want to keep growing the channel, and it's kind of a fun way to get you guys to raise your hands with either the word method or either the word new. If you are someone who's been following these Q&A videos, especially that we've been rolling out over the last couple weeks, I want to give you guys a chance to shine. So let me know that down below, and we'll go ahead and move to the next question.
How do you let contracting know in your proposal that you have your cage code and that your sam.gov registration is eligible and current to receive awards?
Okay, so this is really important, but it's not hard at all. So the reason it's really important is because in many solicitations, there's the back 30 some odd pages that's just like, it looks like FAR clauses and a lot of stuff that you kind of quickly go through. It's all important. However, in that lives dozens of pages called reps and certs, representations and certifications. These are also something that you filled out if you already have your cage code. This also represents the questions that you've answered when you initially went to sam.gov to register your business as an entity to do business with the federal government, okay? So these questions are repeat. So when you go to submit your proposal and pricing to contracting, if reps and certs are included in your solicitation, you are supposed to provide those with your proposal response. Now, sometimes the reps and certs, it'll just say on the one pager, only need to provide, this paragraph if everything is current and active in your SAM. You don't have to, give them all the 30 pages. Other instances, you can go into sam.gov, and I've got a video around here somewhere. You guys can find it on my channel. It's a reps and certs hack. I think that's what I called it. And you can download those reps and certs from your sam.gov entity and put it in a folder, and then you can upload or attach that to your proposal submission instead of having to fill these things out over and over and over again, checking these little boxes. Are we WSB? Are we VOSB? Whatever. Are we HubZone? Are we 8A? And many, are we a predecessor company? These are some of the questions you would see in reps and certs in case you've seen them before. That's what I'm talking about. So it's important because it takes up many pages, but it's pretty easy because if you have a cage code, you've already filled it out. And like I said, in many instances, sometimes you can just provide that one pager. If you read underneath the reps and certs title, there's sometimes invariably a paragraph in there that will allow you to do that. If you are attesting, I think the word is that your SAM's registration is updated and current. So that would be the section.
What is your number one rule regarding all government forms?
So with all these forms we're talking about, here's the rule. We don't go hunting for forms. I'm going to repeat that. It's a good thing to write down. We never go hunting for forms. Do not go to Google or your favorite search engine and try to look up a SF 1449 form because you're like, oh, I watched a video and I'm supposed to include these. No. Contracting must provide that to you because that form has specific contracting office detail information on it that you're not going to get from a generic form online. Okay? So contracting has to provide it. If they are asking for it and they have not provided it, you need to let them know that it is not provided and wait for them to provide it to you because you will not be able to propose without it. That's the rule for all forms. There's a bit of leeway, as we talked about, with the pricings, CLINs, creating your own table perhaps if they don't give you anything, fine. But reps and certs, SF 1449, 42, 18, the amendment form, SF 30, right? All these need to be provided by contracting. So you don't go hunting for them. If you don't have them, you can ask the question.
Bonus question. What's one app you could not live without?
So fun fact, guys, I hate my phone and I hate apps. And I recently eliminated nearly all the apps off of my phone. So yeah, I'm actively working to, maybe one day I'll upgrade to a flip phone to get away from Apple and Android, which I currently have both for work and for personal. But yeah, I would love to just get away from apps entirely. So let me know if you guys feel that way as well. So guys, none of this matters if you don't understand how to really write the proposals, secure work, win contracts. I created GovRFP, and this is kind of my thank you bonus for sticking around towards the end of the video. I recently unlocked the first 3 modules to my proposal writing system, the same system that I've used with my students for years, except very recently I've updated it and made it way better and more clear and more succinct. Okay, no more really long videos, lessons to go through. It's very short and to the point. And the goal is, if you need a proposal, get GovRFP. You can literally sit down for a few hours with the program and have a proposal that you feel very confident and happy about. Or if you're already an experienced bidder, this is going to help you raise your game to the next level. We also go a lot into pricing as well. So it's not just proposal writing. So if you are interested, you can go to govkidmethod.com, totally free. You just need an email address, find the GovRFP tab, unlock that, and you can get in literally right this second. If you have the inclination to get off of YouTube or whatever and jump into your resource. Now, if you do want to watch another video, I just created another video, which is really important, because in that video I talk about taxes, insurance, and bonding requirements, often overlooked, talked about, costs that are under accounted for. So I go in a lot of details in a Q&A on that video. You should see that popping up here somewhere on the screen. So if you want to continue watching, that would be the next video in the series that I recommend that you watch. And until next time, guys, don't forget, comment method down below if you are following our method, GovKidMethod, here on the channel. Or if you newly subscribed from this video, comment the word new down below so we can give you some love. Until next time, thanks for watching, guys, and we will go ahead and see you in the next one. Take care.